although his opponents, with the exaggeration so common in politics, often did just that. It was a divided government based on the principle of the separation of powers. The purpose of the Fathers was to obviate, or at least minimize, the danger of tyranny by dividing power among rival interests, and the constitutional separation was reflected and accentuated in the residential and social pattern of the governmental community in Washington. Legislators lived on Capitol Hill, executives in the neighborhood of the President's house, and members of the federal judiciary, when in town, associated almost exclusively with one another. As has been well said, the separation of powers became the separation of persons. Divisiveness was further increased by the legislators' practice of living in boarding houses in sectional groupings. The situation was not conducive to cooperation between the separate branches of the government, or to the development of leadership on the part of the President or within Congress itself. While Jefferson, who had members of Congress to dinner almost every day when they were in town, did more than anybody else to bridge the social gap between legislators and executives, he does not appear to have questioned the doctrine of separation. When in opposition, he had strongly emphasized the danger of executive tyranny and the necessity of distrust. In the Kentucky resolutions of 1798, written in protest against the Alien and Sedition Acts and presidential action under them, he said that confidence in rulers is everywhere the parent of despotism, that free government is founded in jealousy and not in confidence. In questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. Since his authorship of the resolutions was known to only a few people at the time, these particular words could not be flung at him when, as the responsible chief executive, he sought to promote social harmony, inspire confidence, and make a divided government work. Even so, he was repeatedly charged with hypocrisy by his political enemies, and he could hardly have failed to give an impression of ambivalence. It might be said that throughout his presidency he strove to reconcile the irreconcilable, and there may have been more conflict within his own breast than he gave outward sign of. It seems indisputable, however, that in his first term, working within constitutional limitations that he himself honored, and in a political community marked by more than constitutional divisiveness, this foe of consolidation achieved genuine, though incomplete, success in his efforts to unite the country and render its government sufficiently effective to perform such tasks as he thought appropriate to it. Before entering into a consideration of his second term, we may remind ourselves of the more favorable conditions and circumstances, both at home and abroad, under which he operated in his first. Along with his own personal persuasiveness and that of his cabinet members, especially Gallatin, the means on which Jefferson most relied to minimize divisiveness and attain cooperation with the legislature was his political party. The term party was something of a misnomer at a time when the affiliations of members of Congress were not a matter of record, and organization was rudimentary from our point of view. Parties were loose groupings without legal sanction or formal leadership. The struggles of the Republicans in opposition, however, had imparted to them considerable cohesion, and among them Jefferson had no rival. Burr read himself out of the party at an early date. There is no way to measure his public popularity with any precision, nor to determine what effect this had on the minds of legislators, but there is no more doubt that it was great and growing than there is that congressmen and senators were aware of it. The skill he displayed in his dealings with the congressional majority and the notable influence he had on legislation during his first term are abundantly illustrated in my previous book. He worked through leading legislators of his own party, carefully avoiding the appearance of dictation, in respect for congressional sensitivity and in deference to the principle of separation of powers. This was not party government in a strict sense. When have we ever had that in the United States? But what was enacted could be described not inaccurately as a party program. Furthermore, and this is very much to the point in any comparison between the legislation of the two terms, laws based on a policy of peace, economy, and tax reduction lightened burdens and called for no sacrifice on the part of the public. A few members of the federal judiciary suffered as a result of an early Jeffersonian law, but the purchase of Louisiana was effected without the imposition of fresh taxes, the legislation of the period when the President and Congress were in fullest cooperation, roughly during his first 3 years in office.